Right now, inside your belly fat, a quiet chemical battle is happening. Depending on which side wins, you either burn through stubborn visceral fat today or you lock it in for months. Most people think fat loss is simple. Calories in, calories out, end of story. But visceral fat, the dangerous kind wrapped around your liver and organs, plays by different rules entirely. There is a small green leaf that might decide who wins this hidden battle. Most people walking past it in the grocery store have no idea what it can actually do. Here is something almost unbelievable. The fat surrounding your organs has 4 times more cortisol receptors than the fat you can pinch on your arms. 4 times more. That single fact changes everything you thought you knew about stress and stubborn belly fat. It explains why some people store weight right in the middle no matter what they try. Once you understand why that number matters, you will understand why a specific tea, not coffee, not a fat-burning pill, might be the sharpest tool sitting in your kitchen. Let's pull this apart slowly, because the story gets stranger before it becomes useful. Nothing here works the way most people assume it works. You would think more cortisol receptors on visceral fat simply means more stress and more storage. That seems obvious. But biology rarely hands you something this simple. Those receptors are not just trouble waiting to happen. They are doorways. And what walks through those doorways can either pack fat in or pull it straight back out. It depends entirely on one thing. What else happens to be circulating in your bloodstream at the exact same moment those receptors get activated? This is where green tea quietly enters the story, and not for the reason most people would guess. The real mechanism has almost nothing to do with caffeine. Everyone assumes green tea works because of caffeine alone. Caffeine does help a little nudging fat oxidation upward over the course of a day, according to research. But that is the small story, the one everyone already knows. The real story hides inside a compound buried in green tea's polyphenols called EGCG. What EGCG actually does inside your body is almost sneaky in how clever it is. It interferes with an enzyme called catechol O-methyltransferase, whose entire job is breaking down adrenaline. Normally, adrenaline gets released, does its job mobilizing fat, then gets cleared out of your system fast. EGCG slows that clearing process down considerably. Adrenaline lingers longer than usual. It circulates through your bloodstream for an extended stretch, instead of disappearing the moment its first task finishes. Now here is the part where you need to lean in closely, because most people assume the story is about to go wrong here. If adrenaline hangs around longer and your visceral fat has 4 times the receptors waiting to receive it, doesn't that sound like a recipe for more fat storage? You are not wrong for thinking that. It is genuinely the right question to ask. Adrenaline and cortisol are stress hormones, and stress supposedly equals belly fat. So how could prolonging a stress hormone possibly be the answer to losing fat instead of gaining it? The twist depends on one other hormone standing quietly in the room. That hormone is insulin. Adrenaline behaves completely differently depending entirely on whether insulin happens to be present in your bloodstream at that same moment. With insulin present, adrenaline plus food plus stress becomes a genuinely bad combination. That is the exact scenario where your body locks fat into storage. But remove insulin from the picture entirely, and adrenaline flips its whole personality. It stops being a storage signal and becomes something else entirely. Without insulin circulating, adrenaline becomes a liberator. It goes straight toward fat cells, especially visceral ones loaded with 4 times the normal receptors, and starts breaking them open. Think about where this strange hormonal pairing originally came from. Your body was never designed for an office chair and a glowing notifications bar. It was designed for a much older kind of emergency, one involving actual physical danger and a need to move your body immediately. Imagine an ancestor eating berries when a predator suddenly appears nearby. Adrenaline floods the system instantly, cortisol spikes right alongside it, preparing the body for action. The body's intended answer to that flood was always movement. Run, fight, physically burn through the chemical storm within a matter of minutes. The stress response and physical movement were always meant to travel together as a single package. One triggered the other automatically, without exception. We kept the stress response fully intact. We lost the movement that was always supposed to follow it immediately afterward. Now it is a deadline instead of a predator, a notification sound instead of a growl in the bushes nearby. And we simply sit there motionless. Cortisol rises from the stress. Insulin is already elevated from a snack eaten an hour earlier. There is nowhere left for that energy to go. It gets pushed back into storage, disproportionately into visceral fat, where all those extra receptors stand ready to absorb the chemical chaos circulating through you. That mismatch between ancient biology and modern life is the actual mechanism behind stubborn, stress-driven belly fat that refuses to budge through normal dieting. And understanding that mismatch also tells you exactly how to flip the entire switch back in your own favor, starting tomorrow morning. The strategy turns out to be almost elegantly simple once you see how the pieces fit. Drink your green tea while insulin is already low. A fasted morning works perfectly for this. No food yet. No insulin spike around to corrupt the signal your body is trying to send. In that particular window, the egg-CG-driven extension of adrenaline stops being dangerous. It becomes a genuine gift handed to you by simple plant chemistry. It means more time for adrenaline to reach deep into visceral fat stores and pull fuel out of them properly instead of getting cleared away too soon. But there is a quieter problem hiding inside fasting that almost nobody bothers mentioning, and it deserves attention before you try any of this yourself. People assume fasting automatically equals fat loss every single time. Sometimes it genuinely isn't, and the reason why surprises most people who hear it. Sometimes the body, especially one that is metabolically stiff and out of practice using fat as fuel, simply panics under the pressure of restriction. It cannot access stored fat efficiently enough, fast enough, so it does something sneakier instead. It starts breaking down muscle tissue for quick sugar conversion. Muscle converts into usable sugar far more easily than fat ever does. The body takes whichever road feels easier in that exact moment. That is part of why people who are insulin resistant can fast for weeks straight and still watch their muscle disappear while stubborn fat barely moves at all. The body chose the easy road repeatedly instead of the harder, more beneficial one that actually targets stored fat tissue directly. This is exactly why timing your green tea correctly matters so much more than people realize. It changes which road your body decides to take. By keeping adrenaline circulating longer during that fasted window, you are essentially making the fat-burning road easier to access than the muscle-wasting alternative. There is one more small piece worth adding into that same fasted window. And it sounds almost too simple to actually work as well as it does. A small amount of vinegar, specifically the kind found in apple cider vinegar, taken during this same fasted stretch of time. Vinegar converts into acetate once inside your system. Acetate has a strange and genuinely useful trick hidden within its simple chemical structure. It can cross directly into your mitochondria and act as fuel there, bypassing several steps that other fuel sources typically require before becoming usable. That shift nudges your cells into a slightly more energy-stressed state. That sounds bad on the surface, but it is exactly what pushes cells toward stored fat. Cells under mild energetic pressure reach for whatever fuel is available rather than waiting comfortably for the next meal to arrive on schedule. So picture the entire sequence laid out clearly from start to finish. You wake up, you haven't eaten anything, insulin is already low from the overnight fast, you drink something like matcha, clean and concentrated without unnecessary fillers, perhaps with a small splash of vinegar mixed directly into the cup. The adrenaline from your tea lingers noticeably longer than it normally would. Insulin isn't present to corrupt the signal traveling through your bloodstream. Your cells sit primed and ready to dip into fat reserves rather than muscle tissue, simply because the chemical environment now favors that exact outcome. For those few morning hours, your visceral fat is essentially working against itself, undone by its own unusual sensitivity to hormones now freely circulating. When you finally break that fast, a hidden trap waits for you, and it is worth knowing about before you accidentally walk straight into it. Your body is still running hot on cortisol from the stress that fasting itself naturally produces throughout the morning hours you just spent. If you break the fast with a large spike of carbohydrates, you stack high insulin directly on top of already high cortisol levels. That exact combination, remember, is the one that drives fat into storage rather than pulling it back out of stubborn visceral tissue. So the smarter move involves breaking your fast with protein first, something genuinely low in carbohydrate content, easing carbs in slowly afterward. You ease carbohydrates in once cortisol has had a real chance to settle down naturally, rather than spiking insulin while stress hormones remain elevated. You are not avoiding carbohydrates forever or permanently. You are simply choosing not to introduce them at the single worst possible moment of your day. Now, what about movement and exercise? Because there is a particular way of training that pairs almost perfectly with everything just described above. Long, steady cardio sessions alone are not the most efficient use of this particular hormonal window your body has temporarily created. What works noticeably better is contrast training, short bursts of genuine intensity layered against longer stretches of comfortably easy effort throughout the session. 5 minutes at an easy conversational pace, then 2 minutes pushed genuinely hard, followed by another 5 minutes easing back down comfortably again. Repeat that cycle several times throughout your workout session, alternating consistently between easy effort and short, demanding bursts of real intensity. An incline walk followed immediately by a hard sprint on a stationary bike works particularly well for most people attempting this specific protocol. Alternating between two distinct movement patterns also keeps your joints and muscles from getting stuck repeating one motion the entire workout session. The short, sharp efforts spike adrenaline naturally, stacking right on top of whatever the tea is already doing throughout your bloodstream. Meanwhile, the easy stretches between bursts let your body actually use the fat being mobilized, rather than simply dumping more stress hormone uselessly. Put every piece together now. The fasted state, careful tea timing, a splash of vinegar, breaking the fast with protein, and contrast-style training. You have effectively built a system where stress hormones, the very thing that normally fills your midsection with fat, instead work to empty it out completely. There is one final variable we haven't touched yet, and it might honestly be the biggest lever of this entire equation. That variable is sleep. Poor sleep alone can elevate cortisol enough to undo every single other piece of this puzzle, regardless of how perfectly you time everything else. You could nail the fasting window perfectly, time the tea flawlessly, train with ideal contrast intervals, and still lose ground entirely from bad sleep alone. Sleep deprivation pushes baseline cortisol upward for the entire following day, not just briefly, but consistently across waking hours regardless of other choices. That elevated baseline interferes directly with the insulin sensitivity you worked so hard to protect through careful fasting and smart meal timing. It also blunts your body's natural ability to respond properly to the adrenaline signals your green tea worked hard to extend earlier that morning. In other words, one terrible night of sleep can quietly cancel out an otherwise perfectly executed visceral fat reduction strategy without you even noticing. That particular topic deserves its own deep dive eventually, covering what genuinely helps cortisol and sleep and what is simply wasted effort. But for right now, understand something important. The hidden war happening inside your visceral fat isn't random, and it certainly isn't hopeless either. It is a hormonal sequence, one you can genuinely learn to play in your own favor, piece by piece, day after day. One cup of tea consumed at the right moment. One properly timed fasted window. One workout built around contrast rather than steady, unchanging effort. Small individual pieces, none particularly dramatic on their own, but stacked together they form a coherent strategy your body actually responds to. Most people chase visceral fat with brute force, cutting calories aggressively and hoping for the best without understanding any underlying hormonal mechanism whatsoever. But your body isn't a simple calculator running basic arithmetic. It is a complicated hormonal system responding moment by moment to chemical signals you can influence. Cortisol isn't your enemy by default. Adrenaline isn't dangerous by default either. Context determines almost everything about whether these hormones help you or hurt you. Insulin's presence or absence in any given moment decides which direction your stress hormones push your fat stores, toward storage or toward release. Green tea's real power was never really about caffeine at all. It was always about extending adrenaline's window of opportunity inside a low insulin environment. That single insight, properly applied through fasting, timing, and smart movement, reshapes how stubborn visceral fat responds to your daily choices going forward. Understanding this mechanism means you stop guessing blindly and start working directly with your own biology instead of fighting uselessly against it. The next time you reach for that cup of tea, you will know exactly why timing matters far more than the tea itself ever could. And the next time stress hits, a deadline, a difficult conversation, an overflowing inbox, you will understand what is actually happening chemically inside your body. That stress response, the one we inherited from ancestors running from predators, is still fully active inside you right now, waiting for a release valve. Give it that release valve through smart timing, the right fuel, brief intense movement, and adequate sleep, and visceral fat stops winning the daily battle. The war inside your belly fat was never unwinnable. It simply required understanding rules nobody bothered explaining clearly until you read through all of this.